Hi everybody, and welcome back to Plastic Models by a Regular Dude, and part one of the Plastic Models for Beginners Tamiya M3A1 Scout Car. So as I talked about in the intro on the last video of this series, I'm doing this as a beginners series set of videos, and I'm just going to keep it real basic, build it right from the box, and build the whole thing, then paint it and all that. So let's flip it open, take a look at what's up first, and get started. Alright, so let's get started. First parts we need are on the D and B sprues. So let's get B and get the chassis first. So like I usually do in my videos, so as not to make them too long, or when I try, I haven't been succeeding very well, but I will demonstrate certain things like cutting the parts off and cleaning them up, and then once I've done it a few times and you kind of get the drift of how I do it, then I won't do it unless it's something that calls for a particular technique or particular care. So that's what I'm going to do. So we cut that part off first, and then we need D32, which is right somewhere. Well, I need D12 and 13. So I'll cut those off. And normally I don't cut stuff off unless they are different enough that they're easy to differentiate which side they go on. Because like these two parts here are similar, but they're different enough that it'll be easy to figure out which side they go on. So where is the other one? D32. Right there. Man, just having a hard time finding it. Okay, so we got that. And then D27. Now this is one of those situations where it has to be built in a particular sequence. And I will talk about that. But first, we got to clean the parts up. Alright, so using my cutters, and I bring this up in all of my videos practically, good cutters are definitely a plus when cleaning this stuff up. Reason being, it leaves a lot less cleanup that a person has to do, because you can get really close and cut it really flush with the part, like thusly. So then, you know what, I'm going to use this other tool, I think. Now, normally I use my X-Acto knife, and I use that to smooth out any mold seam lines like this one right here, like thusly. Then I'll use the blade to smooth that out and get it all nice and smooth. Now, in a part like this, it's not really going to be visible, but it's not a bad idea to clean it up anyway, because it's just a good habit to get into. Now, I have this other tool here. It's a scraper, and it works really good for this as well. like that. So that works as well, but generally I like using my knife for some of this stuff. Nice sharp brand new knife. So I'm just going to go around the whole framework here, the whole chassis, and get that kind of scraped down a bit. So we got that all cleaned up. Now let's move on to these other parts here. There's another example of how these cutters can really help. Cut it really close. Get those little nubs cleaned off. Like that. So while I'm trimming these up, we'll talk a little bit about the color. So generally, Soviet armor is some weird kind of green. It's called BO green or something weird like that. Since this is a Lend-Lease vehicle from the US, they didn't repaint them. They left them olive drab. And so you can just go right off the instructions to paint it. You don't have to worry about, you know, it's like, well, I read that, you know, such and such armor was painted some trippy color and blah, blah, blah. Well, it doesn't matter because this stuff stayed olive drab. So you're safe leaving it, painting it in the colors that the instructions call for. So you're good to go. So let's see, let's make sure that's smooth. Make sure that's smooth. Now, one other thing to look for is ejector pin marks. So on this part here, for instance, there are some very faint ejector pin marks here, but those are on the inside. And Tamiya is pretty good about making sure that ejector pin marks are on the inside for the most part. And because of that, you don't have to worry so much about filling them in, because if you look further down the instructions, you can fill them in if you want, but it's not really necessary. There's this roller that goes in between those. So that roller is going to be covering up where those ejector pin marks are. All right, so now we've got all those parts cut up. So making sure we have the chassis oriented correctly. The first part to do in numbered order is D12, which is this here. Now the nice thing is you'd be hard pressed to put this in backwards because it's got this kind of real shallow L-shaped hole. So you'd really, you really can't do it incorrectly. So put that there. I'm going to take my Tamiya extra thin and carefully, without getting any on my finger, put it right to the joint right there and let capillary action draw that into the part for a nice joint, nice solid connection. All right, so this is also supposed to do this first as well. Same thing, it's only going to fit one way. Make sure my finger's not touching anything, because the capillary action that draws the cement between the two parts will also go between your finger and the parts, and you don't want that. That would be The sad thing, it would just really leave a nice fingerprint that then you would have to try and clean off, sand out. All right, so there's that. And the parts are like really good tolerance, so you don't have to worry about making sure that it's straight. Pretty much fits in there pretty good. So then the next part is this here, and again there's ejector pin marks, but they're on the side that you can't see. And then this fits right there. These front parts here fit up against those little indentations there. And the back, you can see right here, this little notch fits up against this part here on both sides. So you get a nice positive attachment point. So let's do this. There. And there. There. And there. And then make sure it's pressed into place really well. Like that. Looking pretty good. All right, and then lastly is this piece here. Now, in the illustration, it shows how it's supposed to fit. There is kind of an angle in there, and it shows that that goes through and that fits up against it. So it looks like that. Okay, when you push it, you can feel this flat edge right here and here fit flush against this part here. So just hold it in place like that. Touch the cement in there, and voila, just like that. And I think just for safety's sake, I'll put a little bit of cement right there on that flat part. So it looks like that. So when you flip it over, it looks like that right there. So that takes care of step one. So for step two, flip it over according to the instructions. And we need part D16 and two A23s. So let's get those cut off. So we got D16, which is right here. See, if you're really careful, you can cut them off of the sprue really close, and that'll really save on cleanup time, like that. So there's that part there, and just give it a little trim like that. Part on the inside's good. So we got that, and then we need two A23s. So there's one on each A sprue. So we get those cut off. Trim both those up. So need to clean that up a little bit more. Now there's some ejector pin marks on these parts. But again, those can be those are going to be pretty much invisible. There's just one that you can actually see, so I guess if you really wanted to, you could clean it up. Because one side is going to fit with the ejector pin marks facing in, so I think I will clean up that one ejector pin mark. So how I generally do that in a case like this is I'll just use my fine sanding stick and just sand it out. It's really super shallow, so it's pretty easy, pretty quick to clean up. Yeah, see, there we go. All right, so this one, now looking at the instructions, the slope down side faces forward, so that's, we got to make sure, whoops, that it's facing forward. I'll do those after I do this part. So this part here, the bowed up part faces up. Whoops. And those two little raised parts fit into those little channels. So it goes just like that. And then this fits flush on there like that. But just make sure you get it, there we go. It should fit close together like that. If it's like that, you've got it too far forward. It needs to be back so those two parts are parallel, if that makes any sense. There we go. So we got that. So let me hold that in place. Whoops. And there we go. So I'm gonna glue this first. Those parts there. Make sure it's pressed down really good. And then cement that and that, and make sure those are pressed down like that. Then So I'm going to hold that in place, hopefully. Ah. Oh my goodness. There we go. You probably can't see what I'm doing here. There is a piece right here that this slot fits over. And I'm having a hard time manipulating it into place. It's hard to grip, especially hard to, okay. So I'm gonna hold it, and in that opening, touch my cement to that, make sure it's resting flat on there and that it's perpendicular to the frame. Like that. And then do the same on the other side. All right, so I got those two parts in. Now I need parts D44 and D48. There's 48. And here is 44. Get those cleaned up. All right, now with those cleaned up, now I can put them into place. And the way this one fits is, looks like there's 3 contact points. One here, here, and here. So let's give it a test fit. That goes there. That goes underneath there. This part right here fits into a slot right there. So that gives you a nice positive. Man, that's just like sitting there. Ugh. That's a nice thing about these Tamiya kits these days is they fit so well. Glue is glue is almost an option. Just kidding. They do fit really well. So we'll do that, and then this one goes in there like that. That part right there fits up against the frame. So we'll put a little cement there. And then some cement there. Oh, splendid. Like a glove. And then we'll put another little bit right here. Excellent. Just make sure it's all pressed down in all the way where it's supposed to fit. So then this piece fits on this side, and so this kind of funnel shaped bit right here fits right there. And this part here fits in an indentation right there. So let's just see how that works. So that goes there, that goes there. goodness, that's epic. Push that up to where it's flush. Cement like that. And then fit that piece there. And voila, that is that. Okay, so that takes care of that. So it shows you where they're supposed to go and how it's supposed to look after. Like that. So that's steps 1 and 2. All right, next up we have step 3, which is, as they call it, the propeller shaft, which, at least here in the US, we call it a driveline. But that's what's up. So let's cut these parts off. So we got C6, which is a big long piece. And then 2 A10, A11, and then D34. So let's get that. So let's do the C6 first. And that is right here. And then we have A11 and A10. We've got 2 of those. So we've got one set on each A sprue. Whoa. Get those cut off. So after I get done with this, I think with this video, going forward, I'm not going to actually show cutting and cleaning up, because by now you're getting a good idea of what I'm doing. And at the beginning of each video, I'll probably do the first couple of parts like that for people who may be coming in after the first video, and that way it'll either refresh people's memories, or people that are just coming in, they'll see what I am doing. In this case, you know what, let me zoom this in too, so you can see a little bit better what's going on. So I'm just cutting off these sprue attachment points here, like this. Okay, let me do a test fit here because I want to see something. Okay, so let's see what we got. Yeah, there's a little groove right here and a little protrusion right there on the inside rim of this flange, so it'll fit in there right. So with that in mind, there is a mold seam line that needs to be cleaned up around this edge. So that's just going to take a little bit of scraping like this. On both of these parts. And I'm going to sand those spots where I cut it from the sprue a little bit because it's feeling a little chunky there. And to check if it's smooth, if I've gotten it smooth enough, as I just drag my fingernail across it and make sure it doesn't hang up. The blade of the knife was hanging up a little bit, but once I get it sanded, then it's not hanging up on my fingernail, so I know it's smooth enough. All right, so there's that, and then make sure that one is smooth. Now on this one, there is a mold seam line around the edge, and in a case like this, this is supposed to be two flanges bolted together. It's perfectly acceptable to leave it there. All right, then we have this part right here, which is, I believe this is the central discombobulator, but I'm not sure. Just kidding, folks, I made that up. That's not a real thing. Okay, now there's a bit of mold seam in there. It may not be visible, but I'm going to go ahead and shave that off. I know that one's not going to be seen. This one could be seen if you were to really look at it. And all these mold seam lines and stuff, you know, some of them are just like pretty close to invisible as it is. And if you're going to do mud and all kinds of junk like that, it's really going to cover it up. But keep in mind that even if it's almost invisible, if you just do paint and just some light weathering, like with oils or anything like that, it can really accentuate a mold seam line, and can be quite a bummer whenever you're nearing the end of a build only to discover there are mold seam lines and stuff like that visible. That is enough to make you want to weep. You know, all that biblical wailing and gnashing of teeth and all that. Alright, so that looks like all of those. Now this is a case where there are very faint mold seam lines. So I'm going to hit those with the old sanding stick here. Like this. There's some here. There's also a protruding ejector pin marks, a couple of them right there. So even though they most likely won't be seen, they are pretty prominent. So I'm going to go ahead and knock those down as well. Just in case. And the way I'm going to do that, this is my handy dandy knife here. Or cutters, and that didn't work, so I am going to use my knife. It's pretty good sized, but it comes off really easily, so no big deal. There's that one. That one there is on top of this U-joint, so it's actually kind of the same shape of the detail that's there. Then we have some more seam line here. Here. Now, I recently saw a video where somebody was having trouble scraping, and they were getting some weird, like, I don't know if you'd call it chattering or something going on, to where their scrape marks were not smooth, they were kind of rough. And I don't know for sure, but it might be due to a dull blade. You want to have a really sharp blade for doing this kind of stuff, because if you don't, I've found that you can get like little ridges. And also, when scraping stuff, you don't want to have your knife facing into the scrape, because it's just going to gouge it. Even if you have it pretty straight up and down and perpendicular to what you're doing, you still risk it. You want to have it just ever so slightly, so you're dragging the cutting surface across. So that's just a little tip there for anybody that uses this method for getting rid of mold seam lines or any other, you know, stuff like that. You don't want to scrape back and forth, because, you know, it's going to be smooth that way and then it's gouging that way. So if you can see what I'm talking about, I'm tilting away, I'm tilting into the scrape. So that's just something to think about if you use this method of cleaning up mold seam lines. I prefer scraping to sanding, because especially on something like this, you know, sometimes if you're not careful, you can really get some weird contours going. Whereas with the knife, I find I can maintain the cylindrical cross section just by scraping very easily, not removing much material, and not just focusing on one spot. So I don't know if you noticed, but whenever I do scrape on cylindrical type things, I'm constantly moving it. Observe. I'm sure if you were to look super close with magnification, you could see some flat spots, but by keeping it in motion and not just scrape in one spot, you avoid that. All right, so enough blabbing. So let's get out the old cement here, and let's glue these together first. Basically, I'm just going to hold it on the end. Let the cement do its thing. Like this. And like this. Make sure that's squished together good. Then taking this, the first part I'm going to do is this D34 here, and making sure I have it in the right direction. Fits just like that. Now that fits together really good, so I'm not too concerned about the seams, because again, they're underneath. And it fits so well that after it dries, I can just use the edge of my knife and scrape that smooth. But the part you can see, which is on this side here, this is the part I would focus on to remove the seam line right there, because that's the part you might see underneath the vehicle, but I think it's going to be up high enough that you wouldn't see it. All right, so we got that in place. So now we need to glue this in place. So according to the instructions, when you're holding this way, the short drive line here, long drive line there, you want to have the long portion of the differential facing this way, and then the opposite on the back. And again, I think it's one of those things that you really can't put it in backwards, because if you did, it wouldn't fit. You could, well, yeah, you could put it in backwards, but then it's going to look weird. But it goes like that. So we'll do that, and the old handy dandy cement here. Let's see. Slide it in place. Then there's a seam, there's a joint right here that you can see. That'd be a good place to apply some cement. Like that. All right. Then we'll do the same back here. Same thing. Make sure it's going the right direction. Cement there. Oh, and there. Oh, I need some more cement. It's kind of hard. I'm trying to twirl around, keep it in view of the camera. All right, boom, like that. All right, so that finishes step 3. So the next part, step 4. So step 4, the this has to be oriented like this, which is downside up. So we need D52 and D51, and those are sided, so we got to make sure we put the right one on the right side. So we've got D52, which is this one. That hideous buzzing sound is my dryer in the laundry room, since I'm not too far away and the door's open, so you'll have to excuse that. So 52 goes on that side, 51 goes on this side. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and cut off D43 and D45, which are these exhaust parts here. So D43 is here. Set that over there, and D45, which is right here, which is kind of cool because it's just the tip of the tailpipe, but it's slide molded, I guess, or something, to where you have, you don't have to drill out the exhaust. It's already got a nice hollow cavity there. All right, so let's just, there's more D parts that have to be cut off, but we'll come back to those. We'll just take care of these first. So again, clean up. I cut them pretty close, so I should just be able to sand it a bit. Now, leaf springs on model kits often have a seam running right down the middle. So if you want to get rid of them, you kind of got to do each one. Now in a case like this, where it's a nice new molded Tamiya kit, that cleanup is going to be very, very easy, because those seams are very, very faint. I mean, you can get away with not even doing it, but you know, I'm gonna, just to be a good example for my fellow man. Okay, and then right along there. Right along there. And this side. So I'm going to clean these up. These are going to take, you know, a few minutes, so I'm going to do this off camera so you don't have to watch. Okay, all these parts are cleaned up. So before I do these leaf springs, I'm going to glue the tip of the exhaust on here so I can dry really good before I mess around with it. See, it's got a nice hollow tip on it. All right, so let's see. All right, so D52. And this is another one of those things you really can't screw it up, because the way this is, there's a cutout, but it's also got a notch in there. So there's this like little ridge here with a little protrusion, so it's only going to fit in there one way. So that goes, so on the end that goes, this little peg goes in that hole, and that goes there. So let's see.
Do you have a fill-out paper?
There we go. Yeah, that fits in there really super snug. So let's put a little bit of cement right there. Make sure it's pressed in there really good. And it's supposed to be vertical, but that's no problem. It just seems to automatically orientate itself. Vertically, whoa, vertically. So I'm putting pressure down and on the side to make sure that sticks good. Like that. And that is pretty good. So let's do the same on the other side. That goes there, that goes there. A little bit of cement there. Squish that. And then that goes there. So I'm going to press that down. Squeeze it together. Make sure it stays vertical. Well, vertical, I say vertical. Perpendicular to the ground. So there's that. So leaf springs are in place. All right, so next we need to glue this part on here. So the way this goes, this fits underneath here somewhere. Right there. Right there is where it fits. But you have to put it in this way. So that goes there. And then this is over top right there. Okay, so this little cutout here fits on that tab from above. Well, from above. The little slot right here fits onto this protrusion there. So let's do this part first, and then I'll do that. So let's get this glued. Right there like that. And there's enough tension that you really shouldn't have to hold the other one. So we'll put that there. And voila. That is that. Wow, that's really cool. All right, so the next parts we need are D17, 59, 60, and 39. Those parts there, which goes on this right here. All right, so got these parts cut off. Now it's just a matter of cleaning them up. The only real cleanup is just these sprue attachment points here. Carefully shaving them off. These are really small parts. This is one thing I like about Tamiya plastic though, is it's not real brittle, nor is it too soft. It's like Baby Bear, just right. So it's a little easier to clean these tricky spots off of these small parts. Not as much likelihood. The way this one's molded, there's no mold seam lines. So there's that. But then we've got the toe pintle here, and that has got that right there. And the other one is right there on that flat spot. Now this one, all these things seem to have, there is a mold seam line right down the middle here of the toe pintle. So we'll clean that up. Okay, and that goes there like that. Okay, now there is a ejector pin mark in the side of this spring here, but it is in between this part of the frame and this part here, so there's not really a problem with that being visible. So I'm going to go ahead and include that while I clean up this other part, because I want this to set up pretty good before I start messing around with it. Press it into place real good, like that. Then I'm going to kind of set it up so it doesn't rest on that part. Okay, so these two parts are cleaned up. So then we need this one cleaned up here. Pretty simple and straightforward. I'm going to sand this one instead of scraping it, because there's not much there. All right, so this part here fits here like that. And again, I don't think you could put that in incorrectly, because it's got a notch and then a step down with another groove in there, so it's only going to really fit like that, because if you put it in backwards, it's not going to fit correctly. It's kind of weird. So let's put that like that. Then liquid cement there, and there. Splendid. All right, so that's done. So now these, again, these only fit one way. There's an L-shaped hole and an L-shaped peg, or whatever you want to call it, so it's only going to fit one way. So again, some nice little engineering decisions on Tamiya's part to minimize the risk of putting parts in incorrectly. Big problem is just getting it in place, because, you know, there we go. Jeez, well, that was harrowing. Okay, so we'll put that like that. Make sure it's pressed into place there like that. We'll do the same thing on that side. I'm going to turn around though, because it's easier to get my index finger in between the rest of the parts like that. Make sure it's pressed in there really good like that. And there you have it. Okay, so there's that. All right, whoops. So there's that. So now, flip it back over. Move on to step 5, wherein we put this whole sub-assembly in place. 2 leaf springs, and then this cover plate right there. So we need D49 and 50. 49, 50, 49, 50, 50, 50. 50 goes on this side. 49 goes on that side. And then 54 right there. Same thing's going to go for cleaning this up, the leaves of the leaf spring and the whole thing. All right, so these parts are cleaned up. So I'm going to start with this one, since it's going to be the easiest one. And it goes right across here somewhere. It goes right let's not do that yet. Not hid. I gotta put this on first. Oh, man. So let's turn this, just orient it the correct way. So it goes like this. And then this goes like that. So the front fits there on that leaf spring, and then this fits. There's a couple of, here, let me show you. After I clean up these spots I forgot to clean up, right there and there. All right, so here's the way it fits. These two notches here fit on these two pegs here on this leaf spring. These pins on these two arms here fit in those grooves there. So again, let's try it. So this one is going to fit there and there. So I'm going to do that first, and then this, whoa, this right here, can't remember what it's called. That'll come to me, but I'm going to do these here first. Get a nice blob of liquid cement in there so it flows all through it. Get a nice strong bond. Transfer case. I believe that's called a transfer case. That's what gives it some four-wheel drive capabilities. Boy, it didn't take me long. Okay, so then that fits in there like that. So we'll take this and cement there and cement there. Make sure it's kind of pressed into place. Okay, this one I can actually cement from this side. Just drop a little in there. That locator pin, hold that in place like that. That is splendid. So there's that. So then once that is done, you can flip this baby around like that. And this goes across here. And the way it works is that pin there fits in that slot. These two ears fit around this here. It's quite simple, actually. Just like that. So that fits like that. So I'm gonna put my cement here and here. Okay, so we got that. That's got that enclosed really good. I see that's one of those things. Did all that cleanup work and it's totally covered. But hey, all right, now this pin fits in that notch. This part fits in that right there, and rest this peg here fits in that hole there. So there's 3 contact points that need to be cemented. So let's put it in its place here and make sure it fits. Good old test fitting. And boom. Like the proverbial glove. So I'm going to go ahead and set this one in place. No, I'm not. Glue this one here first. Make sure that's in place. Then I'm going to do this one here. make sure that's bottomed out in the hole so it's lined up properly. And then lastly, cement there onto the axle. Hold it all in place, make sure it's seated properly. Then we'll do likewise on this side. This one fits there, that across there, and that there. So, same thing. Cement there. Cement there. Make sure it's seated properly. And then cement there. Just like that. So that is all nice and in place. All right, so that gets us all the way to step 5. So I think with that, I'm going to let this stuff set up for a bit, and this will be a good place to end part 1 of the build portion of this project. So next time when I come back, we'll pick up with step 6, which is more of the chassis components. And there's not too many more left. There's 6, 7, 8, 9 is assembling the wheels, and then the wheels assembled on the vehicle. But anyway, next time it'll be step 6. So that ends part 1 of the Plastic Models for Beginners series, Tamiya 1/35 scale M3A1 Scout Car. So I hope you enjoyed this first video, and if you have any questions, hints, tips, etc., put them in the content or in the comment section down below, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. So until next time, for part 2, I will see you all later.